I want to say good evening and thank you for taking time out to join us for the South LA community meeting for the City of Los Angeles Assessment of Fair Housing. We are going to be recording this meeting tonight, and we may possibly share the recording on the city's website at a later date. Before we get started, I want to say that we have Spanish interpretation available, and everyone participating in the meeting will need to select the language they'd like to hear the meeting in. You can do that by clicking on the interpretation button that you see at the bottom, the lower part of your screen. And from there, you can choose between English and Spanish. And we also have a sign language interpreter, and you can choose to see the ASL interpretation using that same interpretation button on the bottom of your screen. Additionally, we are having this meeting closed captioned, and so if you would like to be able to view the captions, we are adding a link into the chat right now. You can use that. It'll take you to a stream text site, and from there you will be able to view the captions. I'm going to pause here for a minute just to give everyone a chance. Just a reminder, everyone, no matter what language your preference is, will need to choose a language using the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. Also, again, captions. You can click the link in the chat to access captions on the stream text site. I'll give you just a minute to select your language and pull up the captions if you'd like. As you're doing that, just a reminder for you as well, because of the interpretation we have, it would be helpful if when we do get to discussion portions of the meeting, if you will speak slowly so that all of our interpreters are able to capture what you're saying. And I want to share a couple of other notes about how we will use Zoom in this meeting tonight. When we have opportunities for questions or discussions, you can use the raise hand button to signal that you would like to speak. Just click on reactions. That's going to be also at the bottom of your screen. And from there, you can choose the raise hand option. So it's reactions and then raise hand to indicate that you'd like to speak. You can control your audio and video using the mute and start video buttons. You can share questions or ideas throughout the meeting using the chat feature. We do encourage you to share out loud. That makes it easier for others to also engage with your ideas and also allows our interpreters to capture what you're saying. So please, if possible, we prefer for you to unmute and share verbally, but you can also use the chat if you'd like to do that as well. We will try to answer your questions during the meeting, but if you have questions we are not able to answer tonight, someone will be in touch with you by email afterward. If you're joining us by phone, you can use *6 on your phone to mute and unmute, and it's *9 would be to raise your hand. And before we get into discussion, I'll mention those options again. And finally, we will be doing some live polling during tonight's meeting using slido.com. You may want to go ahead and open that up on a new browser tab so you're ready when we get to that portion of the meeting. The site, again, is slido, slido.com. Once you get there, there's a code that you will put in, and that code is 2923829. It's okay if you didn't catch that, because before we get into the polling portion, I'll go over all that again. But some of you might just want to go ahead and hop over to that so that you're ready. Here, I think I'll let, I believe Nancy would like to do some introductions.
Yes, hi. Good evening, Nancy Twamakoboa with the Los Angeles Housing Department, also referred to as LAHD. This project, an assessment of fair housing, or AFH, will analyze the fair housing landscape in the city of Los Angeles, essentially looking at whether all residents are able to access housing that is suitable for them, free from unlawful discrimination. It will also look at whether the areas where people live impact their ability to access different community resources and opportunities. These types of studies are required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for any city or county that receives HUD grants for community development or affordable housing. Additionally, as of 2018, the state of California also requires public agencies, including cities, counties, and housing authorities, to prepare fair housing assessments. The City of Los Angeles Housing Department will be leading the development of this study in partnership with the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles, also known as HACLA. So in addition to myself, we have other staff here from LHD who are represented. So I'll turn it over to them to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Joel Montano with the Los Angeles Housing Department. Happy to be here with you all tonight. I will pass it over to Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. Stephanie Garcia. Thank you again for joining us.
I can go next. This is Maya Aboud, also with the policy unit. And this is Camila, just making an appearance.
Thank you. And we also have staff from HACLA. So please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Ann Lynch from the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. I'm not sure who else is on. If they're there, they will introduce themselves.
Hello, Serena Cannon, ombudsperson with the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles.
Thank you. LHD and HACLA are working with Mosaic Community Planning, a consultant firm to assist us in the research and development of the city study. Members of Mosaic's team are here, and I will turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeremy Gray. I'm a principal of Mosaic and will be the primary facilitator for tonight's meeting.
I'm Melissa Mayu, also a principal with Mosaic.
Hi, my name is Jessica Gay. I'm an associate planner with Mosaic.
Great, thank you. If you would like to contact any of the team about the AFH, you can email lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org. This email address will be placed in the chat box for reference. You can also send a message there if you have additional input after tonight or would like to be added to an email list for updates about this project. Thank you.
Forgot to come off mute. One of the most important aspects of the AFH is hearing from local residents and other stakeholders about the needs that you see related to fair housing and access to opportunity in Los Angeles. Having an on-the-ground perspective from many different people living and working in the city every day is crucial to our work. So we'll give an overview of fair housing and the AFH process just so that everyone has an understanding of the topics we are going to be talking about. But most of the meeting time this evening will be a chance for us to hear from you. Your input will help identify priority fair housing issues and their causes. It will also help shape the goals and strategies that the city and HACLA leaders adopt. So it's very important that we hear your perspectives, and we'll talk more about ways that you can stay involved in the project at the end of the meeting. As we're getting started tonight, I mentioned that we were going to use some live polling. And so we'd like to get started by hearing what you like best about your neighborhood. You can share your ideas by going to slido.com, and that link is in the chat. I'll also read it aloud to you. It's Slido, SLIDO.com. And then once you're there, you'll enter a code, and that code is 2923829. And that is in the chat as well. There's also a QR code on your screen, and you can use that, which will take you there. Once you get in there, the question again, we just are interested to know what things you like best about where you live. You can answer more than once if you'd like. So if there are multiple things that you like about your neighborhood, take a moment and add all of those. As you're doing that, your answers are going to populate automatically on the slide. And so as more people are able to participate in the poll, you'll start seeing more words pop in there. A lot of people really appreciate their neighbors, and that's always great to see. I think there might be a few people who are just now joining us, and I want to welcome you this evening to our meeting about the assessment of fair housing. Right now on the screen, you see a live polling slide. We were just talking about what things we like most about our neighborhood. And so if you've just joined us, the information to participate in that poll is posted into the chat. You would go to slido.com, SLIDO.com, and the code that you'll use is 2923829. So thank you for everybody who has been participating in that and adding your answers. We started a lot of people talking about entering their neighbors as one of the things that they most appreciate about their neighborhood. A new one that has kind of taken hold here is transportation access. Of course, the size of the writing on the screen indicates how many times that has been cited. And so many of you also appreciate the transportation access that you have in your neighborhood, which is great. As others are maybe adding to that, I want to give you a chance to discuss. Would anybody like to come off mute and share what answer you added and why? Again, if you'd like to do that, if you're on your phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Or you can use the reactions raise hand button on your screen too, if you're on your computer. Would anyone like to share your response or elaborate on it?
I like the fact that someone entered fruit trees as one of the things they like about their neighborhood.
Yeah, that's a nice answer. So centrally located, we're seeing that appear, and that's been mentioned several times by different ones of you who have joined us tonight. So again, neighbors, transportation access, centrally located are all some of the things that have been mentioned more often. But some of those things that just maybe one person has mentioned are interesting to read as well. I see diverse and diversity both on there. Family, people, walkability, friendly again, neighbors are friendly.
Yeah, Jeremy, we have a comment in the chat to friends and family.
Okay.
So if you're not able to access the poll for any reason and want to leave something in the chat or share it aloud, feel free.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Yeah, friends and family. So I think that's another theme. It might not be represented as well in the actual poll results, but I think that we see that several times in the results here. What about this? For those of you who have been thinking about what things you like most in your neighborhood, can you think of any improvements you would like to see in your neighborhood? Don't type those into the Slido poll because it's going to complicate or change the responses that we're getting there. But would you like to share that either in the chat or unmute and talk about it a little bit? Any improvements you'd like to see in the neighborhood where you live?
We have one hands up, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I think that, and I might echo this may be echoed through all of Los Angeles, is I think that one of the main improvements that can be made throughout our city is focusing a bit on our alleys and getting our alleyways back accessible to the community.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, so there are alleys kind of built into the fabric of the neighborhood, but just making sure that those are usable.
Yeah, you know, throughout LA, you know, we started years ago a gated alley program, which kind of fell through, and to my understanding, it was ruled unconstitutional to privatize public alleyways. And many alleys, once those gates went up, the city stopped the maintenance and care for those alleys, and those alleys became the responsibility of the tenants along the alley. However, since it's been ruled unconstitutional and the gates shouldn't technically be up anymore, they're still up. High levels of vegetation, as well as, you know, in some communities, drugs, prostitution, and of course a hub for our homeless and unhoused residents who live in alleys that are gated and have no access to public right of way, which, you know, many of homeowners paid, you know, pay their taxes and would like to use their alley, and their garages are basically attached in those alleys.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that input. Thanks for sharing. Were there any other hands or anyone else who wanted to share or add to that?
There's a note in the chat about increasing local employment opportunities for better paying jobs and bringing in incentives to bring in more industry.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica.
I don't see any other hands.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you keeping an eye on that. Well, that's great. Thank you, everybody, for your input there. We'll go ahead and move on further into our meeting. Oh, and I saw transportation alternatives just popped up too as we are transitioning over. So thank you for keeping those ideas coming. We appreciate that. We know that having access to resources and a safe and clean environment is an important aspect of fair housing, and it's one we're going to talk more about as we go further into our meeting tonight. So with that said, I want to start a brief overview just about fair housing law, and then we'll have some more discussion after that as well. So generally, when we talk about fair housing, we're talking about everyone's right to participate in the housing market. That is to own, sell, purchase, or rent housing of their choice without fear of unlawful discrimination. And that includes things like renting or buying a home, obtaining homeowners or renters insurance, having access to housing loans, and having fair property appraisals. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, everyone is protected from housing discrimination based on their race or ethnicity, their color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, and disability. We refer to these as protected classes because people are protected from housing discrimination based on these characteristics or classes. Along with the Fair Housing Act, many states have additional protections, and the state of California has a series of laws that expand fair housing protections to include several more protected classes, and you see those listed on the slide here. Those include marital status, age, ancestry, immigration status, language, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, genetic information, veteran or military status, occupation, and any other arbitrary factors. The state also protects people from discrimination based on their source of income, and that includes the use of Section 8 or housing choice vouchers or any other similar types of housing assistance. So as you can see, you have considerable additional fair housing protection under California laws. And here we have a few examples of actions that would be considered illegal discrimination if they're based on protected class. Some examples include telling someone that a house is not available for rent or sale when it really is, or denying a mortgage loan application based on protected class. Landlords or lenders cannot apply different terms to a lease or loan based on protected characteristics. So, for example, a landlord could not charge a higher security deposit or higher rent to a family with children than to a household without kids. A property manager also couldn't steer families with children to one part of an apartment development, and real estate agents cannot steer home buyers or limit showings to certain neighborhoods based on protected class. Refusing to make reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities and refusing to accept Section 8 housing choice vouchers are also examples of discrimination that you might see in your community. While this is not a complete list of ways housing discrimination is present, it does illustrate some of the ways that it may happen beyond just refusing to rent or sell housing to someone. In 2015, HUD, that is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, adopted a new fair housing rule called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, or we'll call that AFFH. That rule called on cities to take a more critical look at the role of housing in their communities. The AFFH rule requires cities to look at access to community resources and opportunities, things like good schools, good jobs, transit, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, and a clean environment. Cities need to consider whether everyone has equal access to neighborhoods with these types of opportunities, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or any other protected class. The AFFH rule also requires cities to take meaningful actions to overcome patterns of segregation and to create communities that are inclusive for everyone. Cities must work to reduce affordable housing needs and other barriers that limit access to opportunities and resources. As Nancy mentioned earlier, in 2018, the state of California has its own affirmatively furthering fair housing law, and that requires all cities and counties to assess fair housing as part of their housing elements. So this is a requirement at both the federal and the state level. So thinking about topics like this, fair housing, affordable housing, being able to access resources in your community, what types of needs do you see in your community? Is there enough housing for seniors, for large families, people with disabilities, people with low incomes? We're going to, again, use the Slido feature here to collect some of your responses to this question. So maybe we can drop that into the chat again, just so that it's handy. But if you haven't used it yet, I think if you have, it's still going to be up. But if you haven't used it yet, we're compiling answers here from slido.com. It's SLIDO.com. And when you get there, you'll use the code 2923829 in order to respond. And those are in the chat now for you, just so that you can get to them easily. Instead of a word cloud, this one is going to generate a list for us. And even as the list scrolls off the screen, you can be assured we will have access to all of the answers that you're putting in, even if they aren't visible on the screen for very long as more people participate. The question again here that we're asking is, what types of needs do you see in your community? Is there enough housing for seniors? We're thinking about large families, people with disabilities, people with low incomes. Do you think people can access housing fairly in your community? Let's see.
Sorry.
Yeah. We're going to flip back to that slide where the results are populating and take a look at those. Here we go. So some of those, as they're coming in, I'll read them. So lack of grocery stores, bus benches at transit stops, lack of lighting, which is a safety concern, sidewalks that are not accessible for people with disabilities, internet access, Places to report violations when a tenant feels their rights have been violated. Housing for people who are disabled and the elderly, lack of healthy restaurants, better food options, senior housing that's affordable, accepting Section 8 vouchers, lack of banks. So a lot of these things that you were mentioning, I think, have to do really both. I think a lot of what we're seeing are specific types of housing, but maybe even more than that, what we're seeing is a lot of community amenities that you'd like to see more of, or that seem to be missing in your neighborhood. Just going back to grocery stores, banks, healthy restaurants, better sidewalks and things of that sort too, street lighting. Some new ones, green spaces, housing with services, again, sidewalks that are not ADA compliant. All of these items times 10, affordable housing and citywide. I think that's a good response. Thank you. Knowing community locations to file housing complaints. I think someone earlier raised that, that's a lack of access that some people have, not knowing if their rights have been violated, and if they have been, what to do about it. And so here again, we have someone pointing out being able to access locations where a complaint can be filed. I see bike lanes, which is another kind of on the amenity or infrastructure side. I think that's good to have in there too. So anybody that has answered the poll, would you like to elaborate on your answer, provide some more detail around it? Why did you think it was important to name the need that you did? Any hands for that? And again, if you're on your phone, that's *9 to raise your hand.
Don't see any hands.
No hands for that. Okay. Let me ask this then. This is our meeting specifically for the South Los Angeles area. Do these needs all pertain basically to South Los Angeles, or are there other parts of the city that you think are particularly impacted by these needs? Serena, I see your hand. I'll come back to you. I'll just, since I asked the question, I'll see if there's anybody who has an answer to that yet. Are these South Los Angeles needs? Do these go for the whole city? Or are there other places outside South Los Angeles that these apply to?
I see Mr. Johnson has his hand raised.
Okay.
I believe that, the focus should be South LA. Every region and every area has its own unique issues. I think this was for South LA, and I think that the responses should kind of be around South LA, since the forum for this particular meeting was in regards to South LA.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Selena, did you want to add?
Yes, I do want to add that I noticed in other areas outside of South LA, there are bike lanes. And there are a lot of areas in South LA where there aren't any bike lanes, and we are a community of folks who do ride their bikes. So being able to have another option for transportation or exercise is something that is lacking in the area.
Okay. Yes, Reverend Wilborn, I see you.
Yeah, hey, good evening. Just firsthand experience, I do a lot of affordable housing throughout 10, 8, 9, those districts. And when I go to speak with my community members, one thing I notice is there are no real markets close to them. Figueroa and 118th, Crenshaw and Slauson, East 57th and Hooper. There's no real markets in those particular areas. So that's why I mentioned healthier and better food options, because you can seriously find fast food restaurants on every corner just about. But as far as the major markets, that's not available.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as you were saying that, someone tapped into the chat that it's only mini marts. So when you're talking about markets, you're thinking fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh meats, maybe things like that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Who else? I see maybe Mr. Johnson's hand is up again. Is there anybody else who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to add here?
Yes.
Okay.
My question is really has to do with when you're applying for housing. It seems as though, you mentioned all these laws for against discriminating, and I think a lot of times these realtors and housing management have found a way to get around that. And I think the major part of blocking diversity in a lot of communities is this credit score thing. It's like, I'm looking for housing and I've applied for numerous places, but a lot of times it just boils down to that. And, it seems like you'll get past all of the other requirements. And then they'll say, oh, by the way, what is your credit score? Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have a 750 credit score. Then we're not interested in you and renting to you. So
Okay.
that comes up numerous times. And to be honest with you, I think certain groups of people who have been, historically in a certain economic, lower economic group, that immediately eliminates them from being rented to.
Thank you for making that point. I think, yes, to tie it back to as a fair housing issue, of course, we talked about protected classes and credit scores. People aren't protected on the basis of a credit score, but where it becomes a fair housing issue is when there is a disproportionate impact on one of those protected classes. And so, there may be reasons that some populations and some groups within the city tend to have lower credit scores. And if that becomes a protected class, there can be a nexus there with fair housing. So that's a very good point that you brought up. I'm glad that you did. Thank you.
Is there any way you can find out that information regarding, certain classes and what the credit scores tend to be for, certain groups of, like groups of racial or ethnic groups?
That's a good question. Offhand, I'm not aware of a resource that would provide us that data, but it's something that we could look into. I would invite you, if you'd like, to drop your email address into the chat. That might be something we could follow up with you about if we're able to provide a better answer after the meeting.
Okay, that would be great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
I know one way we'll look at that in the report is related to home loans, kind of as reasons folks have difficulty getting home loans related to credit. And we'll look at that related to race, ethnicity, and the gender of the applicant.
Okay.
A little bit of information there.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, Mr. Johnson, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say in regards to the fair housing and the credit checks, I think it's unfair that, they're not looking, if I'm going to apply for a apartment or a house, why isn't it things relevant to my past home rental or paying my rent, as opposed to maybe I didn't pay the Daniels jury bill, 1 month. So I think that makes it harder as well to get into housing fairly.
Yeah, thanks. That's some helpful added context around that issue. Thank you. Anyone else before we move on from this question? This is, and I see that you're still adding some comments into Slido, and that's helpful. It helps us keep track of those too. So thanks for that. But yeah, anybody else want to speak to this? Maybe talk a little bit more about why you answered the way you did, what some of those needs are.
I don't see.
Hi, this is Bridget. I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I just had a question. You may have answered this. I'm late coming on. I've been hearing from people who are looking for places that some of these developers or apartment management companies, charge for the credit check and to check the credit. Is there any way that we track if there's an agency or a rental place that is just collecting fees and never, is there any, I don't know how to word it, maybe somebody else can help me, because you can just turn this into, you're never going to really rent the apartment, but you just keep collecting the credit check fees. Is there a way that we can track that, or does that show up somewhere?
That's interesting, Bridget. Thanks for suggesting that. I don't know of anything that would track that. I'm not sure if that's something that city staff might be more familiar with.
I will say, in terms of any credit check that's being done for renting a place to live, you should be able to get a copy of your credit, and should ask for that after they run your credit. And they actually, I believe, are required to provide you with that. So that would be the confirmation as far as that they actually ran your credit, and after taking your fee. So I think that's important to do. And I think that would help in terms of being able to, ensure you're just not collecting a fee and not doing it, not doing anything else with, with the consideration of your credit. And I see Cheryl Turner has her hand raised.
Okay, hi Cheryl.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Cheryl Turner, and I do also provide some affordable housing. And a couple of comments. So one, whenever you're denied, credit or an opportunity to rent, they usually give you a referral or something, so you can go back to the bureau to check to see what was said negatively about you, to give you the opportunity to correct that information. So you should be looking for that if you're denied right to rent based on a credit report or score. Also, I wanted to mention that there have been efforts in Sacramento and to allow you to provide your rental history of payment of rent to the credit bureaus. And I also see out there that there are services that you can sign up for that allow you to start reporting your rental history. And so maybe that's something that we can encourage if people seriously want to do that. I'm not sure they really do, but those opportunities are out there, if we press for them.
Okay, that's great information. I appreciate you sharing that. If there are links to anything related to that you know offhand and want to share in the chat, I would welcome you to do that. But I appreciate it, Cheryl. Thank you. I see a note in the chat about unaffordable motel rental rates. Is that something that anyone would like to speak to or share more about? No?
Miss Kelly, I think you're on mute.
I don't know. Thank you.
I don't know who brought that up as a topic, but of course, that's always an issue, the hotel rates. Um, and, you know, I think in general, you can say that, you know, if you choose to stay in a cheaper place, a hospital is a good place to stay, even though you have a limited amount of time to, get a room in a hospital. But, if you're traveling and if you need to be in the LA area for over a month, then, the hotel rates are just, at least for, I think for a lot of people, they're just, above what they can afford.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you for adding to that. That's good perspective.
This might be a good spot to move on to the rest of the presentation and then other questions that we have.
Sure, yeah. Well, some great discussion there around that question, and I appreciate everything that went into the poll, but also all of your ideas that you shared aloud and in the chat. I think at this point, we are going to talk a little bit more about this study that we're working on and what that will look like. The assessment of fair housing that we're preparing for the city is an analysis of the fair housing landscape in the city of Los Angeles and a plan for how to expand fair housing through 2028. Under the federal AFH rule, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule, all HUD grantees are required to complete a fair housing study every 5 years, demonstrating how they will affirmatively further fair housing. That includes actionable strategies for improving housing access and reducing barriers to opportunity. The AFH will include a variety of components. We'll be looking at demographics and patterns related to residential segregation, integration and income, including those with high levels of poverty and affluence. We will look at access to opportunities like schools and jobs, transit, a clean environment, and whether everyone throughout the city has fair access to those types of resources. We're also going to be considering housing costs and whether affordable housing need varies by protected class. We'll look at public housing, tax credit developments, and other types of affordable housing. Basically, what is available and in what parts of the city it exists. The AFH will include a focus on disability that considers whether people with all types of disabilities are able to find suitable housing in an area they choose. And finally, the study will include an overview of fair housing resources and activities provided by the city, housing authority, and other partner agencies. On top of all of that, community input, including the input that we get from you this evening, will help inform all aspects of the study too. The City of Los Angeles recently prepared an assessment of fair housing for its 2021 to 2029 housing element that illustrates some of the things that will be in this AFH. For example, the city looked at housing affordability by race and ethnicity. And the chart here shows what share of renters spend more than half their income on housing, what we refer to as having a severe cost burden. About 37% of Black and 33% of Latinx renters spend more than half their income on housing, compared to about 28% for white renters and 26% for Asian renters. So we can see here that the ability to afford housing varies by race and ethnicity in LA, which is a fair housing issue that the AFH, now underway, will explore further. Based on all the research, data collection, previous studies, and community input, the assessment of fair housing will identify fair housing issues in the city. And for each issue, we will outline the most significant causes and develop a series of goals and strategies to address them. So the strategies need to be meaningful steps toward reducing fair housing issues. And every year, HUD will ask the city to report what achievements it has made toward meeting its fair housing goals. In addition to meeting state and federal requirements, the AFH will be important as local leaders make decisions about housing policies and resources. It will be built on community input and is one way residents can voice their opinions to city and HACLA leadership. The study will advance past fair housing efforts, including the city's housing element and its previous assessment of fair housing from 2018. Ultimately, though, what will come out of the plan is an action-oriented strategy that can impact the city's decisions about how to spend the grant funds it receives for housing, community development, and homelessness. The strategies will also shape projects, programs, or policies by the city and/or HACLA. The final plan will be adopted by the City Council and HACLA leadership. It represents a commitment by the city and HACLA to implement activities that expand fair housing and stop future housing discrimination for all residents. Here, I'd like to share just a couple of examples of current fair housing efforts that are underway by the city and its partners. Stay Housed LA helps prevent eviction through outreach to landlords and tenants and legal assistance to renters facing eviction. It's a collaboration between the city, Los Angeles County, and local legal service providers that began during the pandemic. It responds to the need for tenant protection, which was one of the contributing factors identified in the 2018 AFH and in the city's housing element. Another approach designed to improve fair housing for renters is the city's tenant anti-harassment ordinance. The law prohibits landlords from harassing tenants by removing housing services, ignoring repair requests, refusing to accept rent, or doing other things that interfere with a tenant's ability to enjoy their home in peace. The ordinance was one strategy outlined in the city's 2018 AFH to respond to displacement pressure and the lack of affordable housing. The housing element identifies education about the anti-harassment ordinance as a goal, and that outreach is currently underway by the city and its partners. You can see from this outline that we'll have many opportunities for public input during the AFH process. That includes this meeting tonight and other similar community meetings that we will hold this month, along with a series of stakeholder meetings and focus groups in January. We also have a survey open that we hope everyone will participate in. We will have a link to that survey a little bit later in the meeting. And then in the spring, we'll want to hear from the community again to get feedback on the draft fair housing issues and strategies that we propose to address them. By the summer, we anticipate having a complete draft assessment of fair housing for the public to review. We'll then make any final revisions to prepare for an August approval by City Council and HACLA. At this point, I would like to pause and just take any questions so far kind of about the project that we're working on. What is the assessment of fair housing? What's the process that we're using to complete it? Any of those past few slides that I just presented, if those raised questions for you, I want to give you a chance to ask those. So again, same way we've been interacting all along. You can raise your hand, use the reactions and raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. It's *9 if you're on the phone. You can mute and unmute using *6. You can also use the chat. And here again, I'll just say, if you're able to share verbally, that's preferable, just so that our interpreters can interpret your responses for others that are participating. But it's also fine to use the chat if you'd like to share things there, and that's easier for you. So I'm going to pause here and just see if we have any questions about the study or our process or anything else we've talked about so far. I see Mr. Johnson's hand.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I noticed like we have 32 participants who are participating today, of which quite a few are actually staff or hosts who are co-hosting the actual forum here. And so the question is, how likely are you to get more input from the regions such as South LA, where right now we have less than 25 folks giving input around the issue of the assessment?
Sure, I
So,
think that's a good question. Go
yeah.
ahead, Nancy.
I'll start and can add on. We will be having additional sessions going forward, as Jeremy mentioned, in terms of our timeline. This is not the only time that we'll be having community meetings and discussions. As the AFH process continues forward, we will be coming back with discussing actual program ideas and ideas for policy changes and things of that nature that will really be the core part of our assessment of fair housing work. And that would include actual metrics and milestones, goals that we have for the next 5 years. And all of that will be developed with input from the public. So we will be reaching out again to South LA as we have that discussion in the coming months. And then also when we have our draft, right, assessment of fair housing draft available for public comment, we're gonna also want to be able to hear from you all as well, to be able to provide your feedback before we finalize the draft. So we'll have other opportunities to have feedback from the group. And just also, so you know, we are also working with another entity for community meetings they are targeting particular populations and groups for community meetings as well. And they're working with other partner organizations, which do serve South LA as well. So those community meeting discussions are also going to be taking place at the early part of the year. So there will be more meetings happening and more opportunities to hear from everyone.
Yeah, and I'll just add, so we are partnering with a community foundation, as Nancy said, to provide small grants to community-based organizations to help convene these forums with their membership base, mostly in areas that have not participated a lot or have populations that are particularly impacted by fair housing issues. I think if there's groups here or leaders here who can help us to convene larger convenings of people, if you have a base of people, if you have folks that you work with, and maybe we can think about doing additional outreach sessions. We would just need, enough people to make sure that we're using our resources wisely. So maybe we can figure out how we partner too.
Exactly. Just to add to that as well, as far as sharing your information, your email contact will be great. So we can be able to follow up in regards to having additional sessions.
Do that. We also have a community survey that's open. So if folks maybe are not able to dedicate an hour and a half of their time to a meeting, they might be able to provide inputs, at a time that's convenient for them. And that's open to anyone in the city. And certainly, if you registered for this meeting and opted to share your email address with us for updates, we will share that survey with you. And if there's folks that you want to share the survey with, we welcome that and would encourage it. That's for anyone to take, and we'd like as much participation as possible.
Great. So this is, I guess I'll just stress again, one of the very earliest opportunities for people to participate. There are lots of others coming up in the future, including the survey. And I think, the city has expressed willingness. We want to find opportunities to get this in front of people who it matters to. And so if there is a group that we can do that with, that you could put us in touch with, we'd love to talk more about it. I have a couple of hands, so I'll call on a few others to share here or ask questions here. I'm not sure who was first, but how about David Lee?
Hello, thank you for this meeting. I have two kind of related questions. The first is, I wonder if a renter feels that their fair housing rights have been violated. For example, they feel like their landlord rejected them because of Section 8 voucher. I wonder if there's a place that they could turn to, like a agency, government agency, and kind of related to that, what is whether some of the agencies would be willing to provide some guidance as to their position, because I do think it might be different between me as an individual telling my landlord, hey, I think you're doing this and doing that, as opposed to if I were to get like a pamphlet from a housing department and show it to a landlord. It might make a much bigger difference than me just giving my own opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That is a great question. You want to take that, Nancy?
Yes, if I can respond to that, there is, and we can include it here in the chat, there's the Housing Rights Center that the city contracts with that addresses issues such as that. You know, if there's any issues in terms of fair housing complaints or, you know, an issue where, you know, landlord has denied a Section 8 voucher or anything of that nature, that's something that can be looked into and investigated. And then also just, you know, if there are certain, you know, there's a complaint about, you know, a landlord and there's multiple complaints or whatever the issue may be, the Housing Rights Center can send out people which are called testers to go ahead and, you know, go through the process of finding out what, if in fact, you know, there is a fair housing issue there. So for example, if you go and try to, you know, seek out an apartment unit and you get to a property and the landlord says, we don't have any vacancies. But in fact, you know, there are vacancies there. You know, can work with the Housing Rights Center, let them know, and then they can send someone out, someone else who perhaps looks differently, speaks differently, or whatever the case may be. And they will send out a tester to go to that same apartment unit to seek out a place and see if they are allowed the opportunity to see a vacant unit. And at that point, if the landlord is able to actually you know, move forward with actually engaging with them in that manner. So those are the types of things that they do, but we do work with the Housing Rights Center. So it's in our, which information was just placed in the chat. So I encourage you to, you know, take down their phone number and their website to be able to have that handy when needed.
Yes, I think so. Yes, there are some resources there in the chat. I hope you'll stay on the line because there's a discussion question we have coming up in just a minute where we want to talk a lot more about that too. So thank you, David, for bringing that up. I see Danelle Gibson. See your hand.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I honestly, I forgot my hand was still up. Actually, a couple of you already answered my proposed question about the impact of you know, public comment and feedback that you all are accumulating and how that will be used later on through the process and the timeline that you showed us earlier. And so I'm a field organizer with Abundant Housing LA. And South Los Angeles is one of the regions that I oversee. And so specific to South LA, I wanted to learn more about how we can, about how our voices can be louder. And especially when it comes to being written down on paper. Because a lot of times, in my experience, what I see is that, you know, feedback gets fielded, it gets written down, and it gets put into a bin and it collects dust at times, as opposed to other commentary that may come from other entities and or stakeholders who, for one reason or another, their priorities are move forward, if you will. And so, but you all answered my question earlier. I'm actually going to go ahead and type in my contact information into the chat here to see how myself and Abundant Housing LA, how we could be of service to you all. in addition to the community specific to South Los Angeles, and there's a couple of other regions that I do oversee as well. However, for this conversation here, I would love to continue on and you know, stay in line with your timeline to ensure that the people of South Los Angeles are hearing their concerns being heard, and then hopefully as we move on into the next legislative year, we actually see these plans put in action. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Very good. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us, for sharing that. We will take the information that you put into the chat, and staff can follow up with you after the meeting too, if there are opportunities for us to work together to collect better input from South LA. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that. Yes, so as you share your email address, we'll be able to collect that and be able to add that to our list, so we're able to follow up as needed, because we do have particular folks from the community who have expressed interest in staying up to date and on what's happening with our work. So we definitely want to be able to have your contact.
Thank you. I'm sorry. One more question. So sorry. I saw you about to get it rolling. I'm sorry. In terms of feedback, are you all open to collecting letters?
Yes.
Letters that entail positions and that would include multiple signatures.
Oh.
When I say signatures, I mean like signatories from not just the community. I mean, that'll probably be feet long, but also community organizations and agencies that we have here that have been doing the work for some time and just for some reason, you know, or another, have not been loud enough. And so we know that, you know, when snowballs are small, you know, they get noticed when they grow. So would you all be open to, you know, accepting letters as well?
I think so in terms of letters, we're accepting letters more so in terms of when we have a draft, and we want to be able to actually have responses to that draft. So we will want written comments at that time. But if there's anything in terms of actual information about changes you want to see, particular ideas about program policy changes, things like that. If there's anything written, yes, you can share that with us, and we can provide our email address for you to send them to.
Nice. Okay. Thank you all so much. I do apologize for interrupting.
No, this is your meeting. It's for you. Thank you for sharing. I think at that, I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to move on a little bit further. And what we're going to move into is some more discussion. We're going to continue to use Slido for this. So again, slido.com. The code, you see it there on your screen. The QR code will also take you there, but the code that you'll need is 2923829. So we talked a bit ago about Stay Housed LA. We talked about the anti-harassment law that help protect renters. But what we're interested in hearing a little bit more about are what sorts of agencies or services do you know about in the city of Los Angeles that help protect people's housing rights? Maybe that's maybe they're providing fair housing education. Maybe they're doing a good job of that. I think someone mentioned testing, fair housing testing. Maybe they do that sort of work. Maybe they help people file housing complaints. But we're just kind of interested in you as residents of South LA, what your experiences are, what your knowledge is, and how well aware you might be of some of the resources that are out there. So if you'll take a minute to add into the poll some of the ideas that you have, where would you go if you felt like you had been discriminated against? Who's doing a good job of telling people about their fair housing rights? Some of that is the input that we're looking for. And let me give you, I don't see as many people jumping into this one. So let me give you that
What about the
the,
Fair Housing Employment Development Department, Fair Housing, FEHA, from the state of California? It has local offices.
okay. Yes, I think that's right. So that's a state office and they work,
Yes,
yes, on housing, or not just, they work on discrimination in employment and
Yes.
housing, right?
that's
Okay,
right.
good. Yes, thank you for that.
I think too, if this is a question that you don't have an answer for, or you don't know about fair housing services, if you want to type that in too, that it's not something you're aware of or you don't know, that helps us kind of get a sense of how much do people know about these organizations? Is it something that's out in the community or not?
Yes, good point. Thank you, Melissa. So that's slido.com. The code is 2923829. So a couple of the ones that we see here, a new equity department. I'm not sure, I would invite you if you'd like to add to that. Is that a new city department that you're thinking of there? Rent control as one of the services that's available to help protect fair housing rights. And as these responses are coming, I'll invite you to share them verbally as well, just like Cheryl just did with the state's office. So are there any others that you can think of? And like Melissa mentioned too, if you can't think of any, if that's something that we need to know, some of these organizations, maybe we could help them do a better job of getting the word out, a better job of communicating what they do. So if nothing comes to mind, that's important input for us as well. Okay, the Eviction Defense Network, the Civil and Human Rights Department.
I don't see any hands, Jeremy.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to a different question then. I appreciate everybody taking time to add those responses in there. For this next question, we wanted to ask about your awareness of housing discrimination that happens in your neighborhood or in the city. We've talked about this a little bit already. Some of the discussion that we've had, for example, about credit scores and things of that nature. Landlords maybe not accepting vouchers if that's something that you have encountered or you understand happens. So let's talk a little bit more about that. I don't think this is a poll question, right, Melissa?
Right, just a discussion.
Okay, so just a discussion here. So feel free to raise your hand, unmute, and share your answers. But tell us a little bit more about your understanding of housing discrimination. What does that look like? How does that happen? What forms does that take in South Los Angeles? And of course, some of those are examples that some of you have already shared. And I see there's a hand raised on the phone. You can go ahead and share with us, please.
Hi, thank you very much. I have a burning question. This question probably deviates, but my situation is this. I have been in need of repairs to my apartment since the beginning of this year. And my landlord is denying me repairs because I don't have renter's insurance. they are trying to force me to purchase their renter's insurance. Is this legal?
Thanks for that question.
So, ma'am, this is something that is an important issue that I think should be discussed with folks at the housing department. So we do have staff that address issues such as this and can look into your concern and can be able to best address whether it's illegal or not legal, and then what course of action needs to be taken. So we will put in the chat the contact information for our rent hotline, and we have staff available who will respond to you. So we'll provide that in the chat, and perhaps you can reach out to them tomorrow, and they'll be able to address your issue.
Okay, I am on the phone.
Okay, you are on the phone, that's right. Okay,
Could
so
you provide me with?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
I can provide you with the phone number. So
Okay, I'm
ready?
prepared.
So the number is 866-557-7368. I'll repeat it, 866.
And what is the name of this agency, please?
This is the Los Angeles Housing Department. So the number again is 866-557.
I have it.
Okay.
Could I ask one more question?
Sure.
Sure.
Please, I know that you're going to be signing off in about 10 minutes. So this is one more question, please. When the law was passed that that the city put a cap on how much a landlord could charge, that was a 10% cap. Am I correct? But my landlord charged me the same year when that went into effect, I believe it was in 2020, they charged me 13.5% increase for my rent.
Okay.
So I want to know, can I do something about this? I'm a senior and I've been trying desperately to get help, and I'm not getting help.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Would you mind sharing is your name with us, or even just your first name if that's all you're comfortable with? It will help us be able to follow up with you better.
My first name, my first name is Sherry.
Okay. Thank you, Sherry.
And one, if I can respond to that question, you can again, the number that was provided, they will be able to address that to determine, first of all, if you're in a rent stabilization.
I am not. I'm sorry. I am not. I already checked.
You've checked already. Okay.
I am not.
Yeah. So under that, as you may know, there are a certain limit in terms of allowable rent increases per year. If you are in a rent stabilized unit. But if not, then unfortunately there's certain protections that come with that. But if you're not, then
is there a statute of limitations? I'm sorry, I'm just burning here. I am just all over this. Is there a statute of limitations?
I am not
I think that when you call the housing department with the number that Nancy gave, they both can investigate on the habitability issues, the complaints, and also on the rent increase. So even though it's not RSO, you are protected under AB 1482, the law that was passed that you mentioned. So you can talk to the hotline staff about that, and I think they'll be able to provide a little more guidance.
I appreciate your help. I am so sorry I'm appearing rude here, but those questions, I have been holding this in since before you started. So I appreciate all of your help on this evening, and I will tune in to more of these discussions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us. And I hope that those resources are helpful. And I do think that maybe talking through some of the details of your situation with somebody who is knowledgeable and experienced in taking those issues is going to be helpful. So I hope that works out. Thank you. Anybody else? So again, just reminding you of the question, we're talking about housing discrimination in Los Angeles or South Los Angeles. Any personal experience of that, or do you know somebody who has experienced it? What forms does it take? Anybody else want to share on that question?
And I think we have about 5 or 6 minutes more of discussion time. So if there's anyone who hasn't shared anything yet that would like to, please do, or anyone else that has last comment.
Well, I think when you're talking about, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I think when you're talking about housing discrimination, I think you need to know which are organizations that have a track record of having, successfully, help to, clients to make, either actions or whatever that brought about some kind of successful conclusion to complaint. And, I don't know whether, I'm not sure. I mean, I always think of organizations like that have legal, that can take legal action. I think that seems to be the way to go because, I mean, I'm not really sure, but I just feel like if people are sued, then maybe they're more likely to, comply with the law as opposed to, just somebody filing a complaint and them listening to having the complaint being presented to them and maybe nothing is done to follow up by the city or other agencies.
Okay.
I'm just not that sure what is the most effective and, the most timely way to get results for, if you're discriminated against. Sometimes bringing it to the media also helps as well. If the media, will, take your story and publish it and embarrass whoever's discriminating,
Right.
Against people.
Okay, so it may be helpful if that information were available, kind of what organizations do that legal work versus maybe just something short of that and what their track record is with it. So if you're deciding who to take a complaint to, you're going to somebody that you're confident and
Right.
can do a good job handling it. Okay,
Right.
thank you. Well, I don't see any other hands raised. I think what we will do, with just a few minutes we have left, is we will continue on just to close out our meeting here with some last thoughts and information for you. This has been a great meeting tonight, so I want to thank you all. Many of you were able to share some of your input either in the polls or in the chat or just in the meeting itself. That is really helpful to us. So I thank you all for doing that. There might have been others of you who came just to listen in and hear what we're talking about and to learn more. That's a valuable thing too. And so we thank you for that. Over the next couple of weeks, we will be updating the city's AFH website. And you see that address here on the slide. I'll read it out to you for anybody who's not in front of a computer. It's housing.lacity.org/residents/assessment of fair housing with hyphens between those last words. So assessment of fair housing hyphenated. The information that we're going to post there will include summaries about what we heard from you tonight in this meeting, but also from the other community meetings that we have held and that we have coming up still. So if you'd like to see what your fellow Angelinos shared, you can check that information out on that AFH website, and you see the address again there on the screen. So you can continue to participate in meetings over the next few weeks as well. So there are more meetings just like this one. You see those listed on the slide here. Please invite friends, colleagues, neighbors, anybody that you think would benefit from the meeting or you wish had been with you here tonight that couldn't make it. There are opportunities for that. So you see those other meetings. There's a link on the site where you can register for those. There's a QR code that you can see on their slide as well that will take you to the page for more information. The more people that participate in the project, the better it's going to be, the more responsive to the community's needs the study is going to be and its recommendations will be. So we really do hope that you'll help us spread the word about it. We mentioned the Fair Housing Survey also, and I want to make sure that you have this survey information. That's also available on the project website. There are two surveys, actually. There's one available for the general public. There's a second survey if you are representing an organization that is engaged in housing or social services. And as I mentioned earlier, to get updates about the project and future opportunities, you can send us an email to get onto a list to be notified as those opportunities come up. So if you'd like to be added to that list, send an email to lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org. And if you do that, we'll add you to our mailing list. That link is now in the chat also. So we would just need your name and your email address and we'll add you. So again, I want to thank you all again for being here tonight, and I'll let Nancy close the meeting from there. Thank you.
Yes, again, thank you to everyone for your time and ideas that you provided tonight. Your voice is helping to make this a stronger study that will help shape fair housing access in LA for years to come. So please take note of the project's website link and email address in the chat box to stay engaged. We do look forward to seeing you again as work on the project progresses. And before we go, we would like to invite everyone to turn on their cameras if you're willing to do so we can take a screenshot of all attendees. This would be great for us to share for our social media posts and for other updates about our AFH work. So.
Well, good night, everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone.